The problem is, the reason those drag queens were mocking Christ as they were is because they know more about the message of the Bible than many preachers do. They know that the Bible says that sinful lifestyles of all kinds, including theirs, is an offense to Christ. The Bible couldn't be any clearer. And so they openly mocked Christ in an attempt to make a statement about inclusion, a statement for the whole world to see.
From Living Word Church, you're listening to the Living the Word podcast, encouraging you to walk steadfastly in your Christian faith.
The opening ceremony of the 2024 Olympics in Paris caused no little stir on social media and the news. World leaders, pastors, and politicians all took to the airwaves and the internet to voice their disgust at the program put on by the Paris Olympic Committee. In the opening ceremony, there were songs sung and dancers who danced, all of it geared towards expressing the celebratory nature of this event that takes place every 4 years. Celine Dion and Lady Gaga did not garner all of the attention. Their performances were not what sparked this controversy. What sparked the controversy was the LGBTQ-inspired depiction of Leonardo da Vinci's famous portrait of the Last Supper of Jesus and his disciples. In a similar fashion depicted in the painting, there was a stage lined up with a central figure in the middle, surrounded on the right and on the left. The image of this display was clearly an attempt to mimic the portrait of the Last Supper. What was so controversial was that the people who were stand-ins for this display were drag queens, men dressed up as women. The over-the-top display of the sexualization and perversion of the depiction of one of Christianity's most sacred realities was disturbing, to say the least. On top of this blasphemous display, the creators of this program decided to place a young girl in the middle of all of this. This young girl was surrounded by sexually perverted men and by displays of gross behavior. There's so many things to consider here from a biblical worldview perspective. Almost too many to put in this short podcast. One thing that comes to mind is this. While this was shocking to see, it was not surprising. It should not be a surprise that the world hates Christianity and would mock its central figure. There's no doubt in my mind that any attempt to do the same thing to Islam or any other world religion would not be tolerated. But it has been open season on Christianity since the birth of the church over 2,000 years ago. Why is that? Why would the mockery of other religions not be tolerated, and yet Christianity has continually been in the crosshairs of those who hate it? I think the answer is rather simple. Because Christianity is obviously true. Because the Christian message of the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus is the truth that cannot be ignored. It cannot be mocked, and many do, but it cannot be ignored. Why? Because it will not go away. It doesn't matter how hard the enemies of Christ try to eliminate him, they will never succeed. You cannot eliminate the God of creation. Another obvious reason these people who mock Christ for all the world to see is because the very reason and purpose for the incarnation of Jesus was to die for the very sins they were publicly and blasphemously flaunting. The message of Christianity has been turned and twisted into many false iterations. False teachers have made the gospel about temporary earthly possessions and fulfillment. The message of Christ and the cross has been hijacked by money hustlers who only want to use Christ for their own selfish gain. The problem is, the reason those drag queens were mocking Christ as they were is because they know more about the message of the Bible than many preachers do. They know that the Bible says that sinful lifestyles of all kinds, including theirs, is an offense to Christ. The Bible couldn't be any clearer. And so they openly mocked Christ in an attempt to make a statement about inclusion, a statement for the whole world to see. Mission accomplished. The gospel truth is that Jesus came to die for sinners, and all of us are sinners. Not one person is better than anyone else. We all fall short of God's standard of perfect righteousness. From drag queens to religious leaders, every one of us needs forgiveness. All of us are headed to an eternity separated from God in hell. The good news, however, is that the God of creation so loved the world that he gave his Son to pay the penalty for our sin. By faith in the substitutionary death of Christ on the cross for us, we can be forgiven. That message of good news is not good news for those who love their sin more than they love God. John 3:19-20 says, "And this is the judgment. The light has come into the world, and people loved the darkness rather than the light because their works were evil. For everyone who does wicked things hates the light and does not come to the light, lest his works should be exposed." What happened last week was appalling. It was blasphemous, but it was not shocking. What we see, or what we saw on full display, is what happens when people reject the light of Christ and love the darkness more than they love the light. And that should break our heart. It is tragic to see people publicly display their condemnation.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you would like to submit a potential question, a topic, or an idea for a future episode, or learn more about the Living the Word podcast, you can visit us at livingwordhoma.com. We would like to say thanks to all of you who subscribed, shared episodes, and left reviews. Living the Word podcast is a production of Living Word Church in Houma, Louisiana, under the leadership of Pastor Ben Buffkin. Our prayer is that you will remain faithful to living the Word.